Oh. So welcome to this webinar, part of the SARE-PDP Training the Trainers in Community-Based Food Systems project. This webinar is Collaboration and Community Team Building Approach to Local Food Systems Projects. And I'm Joanna Lilikas. I'll be moderating today. I'm coordinating this project for CEFS. Chelsea Crawford with CEFS is also in the background helping with moderation today. And then our primary presenter today is Warren Miller. And Warren, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Joanna. It's great to be here, and just excited about the presentation and about the work that folks are doing out in the communities. And really quickly on FountainWorks, we design and manage stakeholder-based projects in the public sector, working with universities and nonprofits, government agencies, and communities. And been working with CEFS for the last 3 years, and worked quite a bit on the Farm to Fork initiative and other projects, and just excited about this webinar and being a part of it.
Great, thanks, Warren. So just to go through the agenda for today, we'll finish with some introductions after this slide. I'll give a background on CEFS and our interest in community-based food systems. And then Warren will do his presentation on collaboration and community team building. Look forward to an interactive presentation from Warren. And then we'll have time at the end for final comments and questions. And just as a reminder, one of the primary objectives of this SARE Professional Development Project is development of teams and leaders that are able to share back the results and training developed through this project and become trainers themselves for developing local food systems. Another objective is facilitation of team development in order to develop and manage food system projects that utilize a collaborative and community-based approach. So from Phase 1 project reports and discussions I've had with Phase 1 project leaders at the SOG conference, as well as project interviews that I conducted with Phase 1 leaders, it's apparent that strong, diverse community partnerships have been a key to the success of many of your projects. So we've included a few resources for community team building in the resource manual that we developed for you and with you. And my conversations with you indicated that additional resources and training on this particular topic would be helpful. So Warren's presentation today can assist in the training of Phase 2 teams, but can also be provided as a PowerPoint resource for you all to use moving forward as you all share this information with others in Extension and in your communities. So just a little interaction here. So Warren can learn more about what your sense of local food systems is. If you could enter into the chat bar, what does success look like to you in your work with local food systems? I see some folks are typing there. Just waiting for that to come up. Okay, if you're sending this into the group, make sure you have send to this room clicked on your chat bar. Great, thanks Tess. Lots of people eating healthier than they were before. Great. I see Amanda's typing and Nancy's typing. Farmers getting fair wages, self-sustaining interactive learning landscapes that encourage all to participate and explore. These are great. Easy access to local and fresh fruits and vegetables and plenty of money in the supply chain. Great, thanks Nancy. And I see Taylor's typing, Nancy again, so we'll wait for their responses. And meat and other products, sure. Production practices that build soil. It looks like Taylor's still typing. One more and then we'll move on. Health, community, producers, all on the same page. Excellent. Thanks, Taylor. So moving forward, if you could just let us know where you are in North Carolina. I mentioned the whiteboard tools, which should be on the left of your whiteboard. If you'll grab the little tool, it looks like a magic wand, and just click that on your county so we can see where you all are today. Great. Wake County, Chatham County. Great. We're pretty much in the center of the county right now. Oh, we've got somebody dropped a web reference in there. Let's see if I can delete that. Okay. Well, we're going to move on so we see where you're located. Thank you for that. Okay, so some of you all are new to CEFS. I think one person on the call right now, but we're going to do this, excuse me, on the webinar for now. We're going to go ahead and do this for those viewing this in the future. So I'll start by giving a brief background of CEFS and their involvement in local food systems, and then I'll pass the microphone on to Warren for his interactive presentation. So for this first section, I'll ask you all to leave your questions until the very end of the webinar, and that way we can focus our time on the primary content that Warren will present shortly. And Chelsea, oh great, Chelsea just put into the chat bar a website for CEFS if you're interested in more information about CEFS. So I just wanted to say a few things about CEFS so you understand why CEFS has taken on this SARE-PDP project and why local food systems are important to the organization. CEF's mission is to develop and promote agricultural systems that protect the environment, enhance rural and urban communities, and provide economic opportunities in North Carolina and beyond. And CEFS is a partnership that's been in place since 1994 among NC State University, NCA&T State University, and the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. CEFS has a long history of partnering with other agencies and entities, including many of the state's leading agricultural nonprofits, through research efforts and many different types of outreach programs. So CEFS believes one of its key strengths is the collaborative nature of the work that it does, and we also believe that collaboration is what is making this SARE-PDP project so successful. So the physical structure of CEFS, which includes different production-based units, offers opportunities for research and outreach that include agronomic crops, vegetables, fruit, and also includes animal production systems, including dairy, beef, swine, and goats. The CEFS program also includes education programming, extension and outreach, and an initiative for developing a sustainable local food economy, connecting industries, business opportunities, consumers, and farmers through a farm-to-fork approach. The Farm-to-Fork statewide initiative was launched in April of 2008. It was a year-long exploration of action opportunities for building a local sustainable food system with stakeholders across the state. And I believe Warren mentioned that he was involved with that and assisted with the community process. It included over 80 advisory members representing all sectors of the food system. So the Farm-to-Fork initiative was launched with the assistance of the listed funding agencies, and it resulted in a state action plan, a report that synthesized conversations and outcomes of the process with recommendations for statewide and local action. And Chelsea is going to add that a link to that report in the chat window. Thanks, Chelsea. And the SARE-PDP project is a direct result of this action planning. So community partnerships and the process that CEFS went through were key to the establishment of the action plan and are playing a significant role in its successful implementation now. Part of the results of the action plan or a list of some game changer ideas that were developed, and we'll allude to those and reference those later in the presentation. So there are a lot of benefits to building a local food economy. Many of you all are aware of this. And listed first is economic development, which also translates to jobs. Other benefits to building local food systems that appeal to a wider cross-section include preserving green space, agrarian aesthetic, health and nutrition, reductions in use of fossil fuels, enhancing the environment, and enhancing access to food, among others. So as the extension agents participating today know, local foods is one of the key strategic initiatives in Cooperative Extension's long-range plan. And Cooperative Extension has appointed a local foods coordinator in every county, and existing agents have been asked to focus on helping farmers in their region produce for and connect with local markets. You can see here that the Henderson County Center has taken the opportunity to feature local foods on the front page of their website. And you can also note that each county has a link to local foods information from their homepage. There's already a long list of accomplishments resulting from the State Action Plan from the Farm to Fork Initiative, including development of a statewide sustainable local food advisory council and funding from the Golden Leaf Foundation to fund a number of the other game changer ideas that came out of the statewide initiative, including the 10% campaign. And many other major accomplishments have been achieved, but I don't have time to go through those today because we want to focus on the primary topic of this webinar. But I want to point out that most of the success is directly attributable to the broad-based commitment of the diverse partnerships that have been developed through the Farm to Fork process. So out of that initiative also came the awareness of the need for more processing, infrastructure, distribution, coordinated supply, and value-added facilities, which are some of the focuses of some of the projects you all are working on with the SARE-PDP project. So I'm nearing the end of my portion here. Some of the folks on board are with CEFS. Wanted to ask if the rest of you all are familiar with the 10% campaign. Just use the little green check and red X to let me know. Great. So the 10% campaign was one of the game changer ideas that came out of the Farm to Fork process. And it's very connected to the work we're doing with this SARE-PDP project. The goal of the 10% campaign is to encourage consumers to commit 10% of their existing food dollars to support local food producers, related businesses, and communities. You can read more about the 10% campaign on the website Chelsea just posted in the chat window. And we're also discussing adding a section on this campaign and its implementation in different counties in the state to one of the next webinars in the series. So I'll just add that the SARE-PDP project is a product of the overall set of state and local action ideas that came out of that statewide action plan to build a sustainable local food economy. And the project's aim is to leverage the wonderful personnel resources across the state that are already employed by Extension to facilitate community capacity building through broad collaboration that's required to develop a sustainable local food economy in the state. So as those of you can attest to on the project, collaborations happening in this project are including those across disciplines with Extension, paired with farmers, community leaders, policymakers, business owners, and local consumers and others to build local food systems in your areas and then across the state. The specific partnerships that were established in the Phase 1 projects, you can find those listed in the project profiles on the website for this project that Chelsea's just posted in the chat window. Thanks, Chelsea. So we'll be updating this website over time as well. And since you are current and future trainers in local food systems, please, as we go forward, make sure you let us know your needs for educational resources and training. Give us input on the best ways to measure success, and also thank you for telling us what success looks like to you earlier in the webinar. And most importantly, share your innovative ideas so that others can learn from you. So thank you for your attention And I want to ask you again if you please hold any questions on this section until the end of the webinar. Chelsea's also going to post a link to a webinar that was put together recently on the 10% campaign that has more details on CEFS as well. So as we move to Warren's presentation, if you need a point clarified, type it into the chat bar, but for other questions, if we can please hold those to the end. We'll be interactive and want to make sure that we get to the end and have time to answer questions then. So thank you.
So thanks, Joanna, and once again, it's great to be a part of this webinar, and I'm just going to jump right into the task at hand to go over the objectives again of what we're going to be focusing on with this webinar. 3 things. The first, we want to make sure that we walk through a process for designing and really managing collaborative local food system projects. That's the first objective. The second thing is we want to share some techniques and tools that will really help you and your teams and your communities focus and better define your goals and your strategies for the projects that you want to be working on. And then the third piece is some techniques for managing collaborative meetings. These meetings might be with your internal leadership teams or in the communities or with particular stakeholders. Those are really the 3 things that we'll be focusing on in the webinar. And coming out of this, two things that we want to make sure that you're able to do, and again, to reiterate Joanna's point. First, we want to be able to ensure that you can take these tools and use them in a way that's effective to be able to develop and manage food system projects. And we want to be able to help you train others in these tools. So coming out of this, those are the 2 key takeaways. So I'm going to jump right into it here, and one of the founding principles of this webinar here, and this is based on a resource that you have that this is from one of your resource manuals that you should have, and we can make sure that you have 3 things that we're focusing on. One is for collaboration and community team building, it's important to engage the wider community. This brings diverse perspectives into the process. It builds communities' capacity to define its own future. Engaging the wider community is a tremendous asset and a benefit to your projects. The second is building a strong collaborative partnership. So this capitalizes on the knowledge and skills and resources of the many organizations in your communities, agencies, and interest groups. So the focus on collaboration. And the third is integrating social and environmental and economic concerns into the development process. And this will help prevent some of the unintended negative impacts. It's important to understand some of the interests that are at work in your communities, so we want to make sure that as part of the guiding principle, thinking about local food systems in terms of these 3 social, environmental, economic concerns. So the first thing that we'd like your teams to do and your teams to think about is a bit of pre-work. We want you to learn before you leap, size up your community's readiness, size up your capacity to act before you commit the resources. 3 things that we've listed here: assessing your community's food system. If you've focused on a particular project, it may be assessing your community as it relates to that particular project. Assess your potential partners. Identify who they are, who they might be, and their capacity to act, both your partners and your team. The point here is to really think about how ready you are, what you have in place, what you don't have in place, and again, think about this as pre-work before you get started. Assessing your community's food system. If you haven't honed in on a particular project, you can start by examining your community's food system to identify opportunity areas for your project. Some of you may have specific projects. Some of you may be open to many different ideas. What you're looking at here is an illustration that was created by CEFS, and it illustrates most current food systems on the left here. and on the right, desired food systems. This is an easy way to help think about where you are today and where you might be. So using this tool here, and I won't get into the specifics of the illustration, think about your food system today. What are the strengths of your food system today as it relates to this desired food system? What are some of the weaknesses? What are some of the issues that need to be addressed? Thinking about short-term, long-term, root cause, producer issues, distribution issues. So by creating a map of your current food system, your ideal food system, and see where the gaps are between your system today and where you might be. This is a simple way to just start to help generate some ideas with your team. Another important aspect here is to think about your stakeholders. What you're looking at here is an illustration of what can be used to identify current stakeholders and ideal stakeholders. And let me walk through this, and you can think about your current stakeholders might be your project team. There might be the food system leaders. Your current stakeholders might be middle business markets. These are people like processing plant processors. Who are your stakeholders in terms of the community? Citizens, particular interest groups. Down at the lower part of these circles, who are producers, distributors, other alliances that you have. There are different ways that you can create a diagram like this, and you don't need to create a fancy diagram like this. It can be something that can be done with flip chart and paper. But think about who is in place today, and then on the right, who might be your future potential stakeholders. And you can design this to fit your particular project. The big point of this is that think about who you have in place, who your current assets are, and who they might be. And the reason is that there are opportunities when you start to think about potential stakeholders that you might want to engage in your project or in your project team. So the second point here is think about your stakeholders. The third thing we want you to do is a readiness checklist. This is your reality check exercise. Before you jump in, assess your team's readiness, your partners, your sponsors' readiness, your community's readiness. Take a moment to think about your ability to do the project that you want to do. Major initiatives require that busy people care enough to spend time and resources to create change. So one of the questions that we have here, and if folks can take a minute to enter potential barriers that you might have had in the past for your team's readiness, your community's readiness, your other partners' readiness. I'd like you to take a moment now. What are some of the barriers that might be in place, barriers that could inhibit your ability to tackle a particular project that you're involved with? So we're going to take just a minute, allow folks to type in barriers that may be in place, barriers to readiness.
Great. I see several folks are typing out there. We'll wait for your responses.
Okay, so we're getting some responses here. Thank you, Shanika. So some of the barriers might be proper planning barriers. Groups might not be familiar with extension, with farmers. Partners' compatible schedules, time to meet. I mean, some of the basics. Buy-in from a school principal and a maintenance for a garden. Thanks, Amanda. So there are a lot of barriers, and this is your reality check. Think about the things that might impact your team's readiness to jump into a project, your community's readiness. Do a reality check. So we're going to move forward. Thanks, folks, for your ideas. First thing we want you to do as you launch into your project after your pre-work, your initial assessment, is build build and bring together a leadership team. A leadership team is a diverse core group of people with talents and relationships and resources to facilitate and lead your effort. Some of you may already have leadership teams in place for your project. Some of you may not. Some of you might need to add individuals to your team. We encourage you to bring a leadership team together. They expand your capacity, your credibility, and they help inform your strategy. The Farm to Fork initiative brought together a leadership team of some 80 people to provide upfront input. While a core team from CEFS carried out most of the planning and management of the Farm to Fork initiative, this leadership team gave valuable input. Individuals from the leadership team were called upon at various points to help support the process. In your local projects, your leadership team may be doers, they may be thinkers, they may be supporters. It's going to depend on the type of project, on the scale of your project, on the scope of your project. But take the time to bring together a leadership team. You might look at existing leaders who are involved in food systems and in your particular project area. You might think about emerging leaders, people who may be willing to become engaged, who have influence and who have networks. Think about latent leaders. People are out there who've been involved in this in the past, other people that you might be able to tap. There are a lot of different ways and a lot of different styles of leadership teams, but again, the takeaway here is bring together this group of people that can really help increase your capacity and credibility and inform your project. So next we want you to hold a project launch meeting. Formally start this process off. So why? Some of the reasons here. It gets it off to a good start. It demonstrates the importance of this and the buy-in that's needed from your team. It really helps to clarify what you're doing, who's going to do what. If you're bringing in people who've not been involved in this conversation to date, it can really help build some relationships, build some trust. It makes it official. It's a start to the project. Launching a project, and in particular a project launch meeting, requires a lot of preparation to get everyone to the table. And the meeting has to be well structured. You want to make sure folks know why the meeting is going to be taking place, what you intend to do, what you intend to come away with the meeting having accomplished. And you can make these project launch meetings a celebration. Get people excited. Eat local food. Have fun. As I mentioned before, the Farm to Fork initiative had a launch meeting with 75 people. A lot of preparation went into that. That was a statewide initiative. But getting that formal launch meeting and kicking off your project is a very important way to get off on the right foot. So we encourage you to have a launch meeting. Even if it's a team of 3 people, go ahead and have a formal launch. So we want to spend a little bit of time about what makes teams work, and what you're looking in front of you, what you see in front of you is something called a team performance model, and I'll walk through this with you. And also I'm going to ask Joanna to email a copy of this team performance model to you. So as you're listening to this presentation, you should be getting an email, a file transfer from Joanna that'll enable you to see this a bit more clearly. High-performance teams need to go through some basic steps, and if you understand the basic steps that teams need to go through, it's going to help you be successful. So the very first step that any team needs to go through is orientation. Why am I here? What are we here to do? What's the purpose of this meeting? What's the purpose of this initiative? Make sure everyone is clear on why we're here. The second thing that teams need to do is build trust, build relationships. If you can build trust and people are clear about the purpose and why people are around the table and who's doing what, they're able to move forward. The next step here is getting really clear on what you're trying to do, clear goals, a shared vision. And then that leads into a commitment where you really have a commitment on what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it. The next step is this implementation, and that's really when you get into the who, what, where, why, and when. And that leads into step 6, high performance, and then ultimately, as you wrap up and you finish, there may be the next step for your team. And the reason I share this team performance model is because it's a natural tendency for people to want to just do it. It's a style that we have in our culture here. We want to get right to it. Let's get it done. What we're saying here is go slow to go fast. Start with some of these initial steps. Get really clear on these initial steps. And when you do that, it's like the metaphor of bouncing a ball. When you get your momentum up back here and you get folks lined up in these initial steps, you get a lot of momentum and that ball really accelerates. When you start right down here and you just do it, you don't get the momentum. At some point, people are asking questions. Why are we here? Well, what is this person? What's the role of this person? What exactly is the goal? So we encourage you to go slow, go fast. It takes time to gain momentum, but when you do that and you take these early first steps, you're going to be successful. And you can think about the team performance model in terms of any meeting that you have, any phone call that you have, any initiative that you have. It could be as simple as a 30-minute conference call, making sure people are clear why we're here, who's on the call and why, what we're here to do, and how we're going to do it. So team performance model is a great tool. It's one that I use when I think about any project that I'm involved with and any group of people that I'm working with. So putting these principles in practice here in the typical meeting, teams want to know why we're having this meeting, roles and responsibilities, goals, and how this agenda is going to enable us to accomplish this meeting agenda. So you can see that you're actually going through these steps of the team performance model in a typical meeting. So just encourage you to think about it. What are the steps teams need to go through to be successful? If somebody new joins your team, at some point you're going to need to circle back with them to understand why this initiative or why this project is taking place and why certain people are involved. So we're going to move forward into when you're launching a meeting, focusing on organizing your project, getting very clear about some things. So the point here is that, again, while you're eager to get started, take time to think through the project on the front end so you don't run into problems halfway through it. And as trainers, when you're working with other people, you really need to emphasize this point. So let me walk through some of these bullets with you. Establishing project organization, what that means is getting clear on roles and responsibilities. Who's going to do what? Who's going to be the person managing the project, the task master? Who are going to be the people that are going to be sponsoring this? Getting really clear about the roles and the responsibilities of the team. Defining the project parameters. That means getting clear on the scope of the project, the schedule, the resources that you have. The project framework refers to how the team's going to operate, when it will meet, how it will be communicating. Just getting really clear on some of these basic things. And then ultimately, we want you to assemble a project definition document. And that term, project definition document, can sound intimidating. This could be a simple one-pager. But the idea is you get very clear on how you're going to be organizing your group, your team, moving forward. So encourage you to get your project organized at the beginning. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about one of the exercises that you can do with your team as you're getting launched and helping to define what project you might want to focus on or what are some of the particular outcomes that you're seeking. So this is a great exercise, and Joanna, in a sense, we walked through this at the very beginning of the webinar. But what does success look like? It's a great question to start with. So what you're looking at here is a mind map of sorts. Again, you don't have to have a mind map with a happy purple person in the middle of it with circles. You can just have a flip chart here. But this is a way to potentially capture the ideas that you're thinking about when it comes to what success looks like. If your team is not honed in on a particular project or idea, you can use a mind map like this to brainstorm ideas and then have your team dot vote or narrow the list down. Or if your team is already focused on an idea, you can use this mind map to describe what has occurred when this project is successfully completed. So we're going to use the example of a farmer's market here. So in this case, let's suppose that your team has already decided that you want to launch a farmer's market in your community. So with that in mind, this is where we're going to ask for a little some response from participants here. I want you to think about if you were to put a farmer's market in place and the farmer's market is highly successful. Tell me what success looks like for your farmer's market. What does it look like? So I'm going to take a minute here to get some input from folks. Go ahead and type, what might success look like for your farmer's market in your community? So I'll take a minute to allow folks. So we're getting some great responses here, and Joanna's capturing these on the template that we have in front of you. All the vendor spaces are filled. You have many vendors. The vendors are making money. You have loyal and frequent visitors here, so you're starting to see what success looks like for your farmer's market. Let's see what other ideas that folks have on this webinar. It's a vibrant place of community gathering. Great. These are great thoughts here. We're going to keep entering these. You can see how quickly you can fill up a mind map like this. All right, so we're gonna keep moving forward here. So thanks everyone for your input. But you're getting these sense of what success looks like. A vibrant place, purchasing locally produced foods, food access for all. And there may be other things that could be success. It could be a clean. It could be easy access. It could be fun for kids. A lot of different things. The important thing here is give your team a chance collectively to define what success looks like. There's a lot of power in using the wisdom of the group to help you define, and it's going to help you as you move forward be very clear about what's success and what success isn't. So we can go ahead, Joanna, and at this point we're going to clear this template, although these are great ideas and we could really spend more time and build off on these and further refine them. So that's an example of if your focused project is on a farmer's market, this is a question and an exercise that you can do with your group. Another way to use this is if you have not honed in on a particular project and you want it to be a space to get ideas, let's think about it as, okay, project launch team. What are some of the potential ideas that we have in place for our local food system, some things that we're thinking about? Just use it as a brainstorming template. And then here you might come up with ideas like a farmer's market, a community garden, a school health initiative. And we can start to list these potential ideas. So when you think about a local food system and a successful local food system, this might be some of the aspects here that you start to capture. So this is a template, this is an exercise that you can use with your team to help really hone in on either potential ideas that you might have or really defining the outcomes that you're shooting for with a particular idea. So we're going to move forward with this. Success looks like. Another exercise that we want to introduce to you is something called an is-not exercise. And the purpose of this is for your team to get very clear on the scope and the objectives. The point here is to make your objective clear, simple, and specific. And so what we'll do is we'll set up two columns. One column is an is column, one column is an is not. And you have to make sure that everybody agrees with what's listed on the is and what's listed on the is not column. And so let's assume our idea is a bit undefined, and we're going to go with the farmers market example again. So under the is, you might say, well, we're going to have a physical market. It's going to be a physical place. It is a place that we will stand up, a physical location. So we'll put that under the is column. It's local only. We want to make sure that this farmers market is local only. And these are just examples that you may choose something else. Under the is not column, you might say it's not organic only. You might say this isn't going to just be a media campaign to buy local food. So this is if your idea is undefined, like we want to have consumers buy more local products from producers. You can use the is and the is not as a way to help shape and clarify what it is that you are trying to accomplish, what you're not trying to accomplish, and make sure that everybody on your team is clear. What happens often is that teams get a general idea of what they want to do, but there's some fuzziness, there's some lack of clarity about what is included in this project and also what's not included in this. So the is not column is just as important as the is column. So I hope that that example is a little more clear to you, but we'll be happy to answer questions on the is not exercise. So we'll move forward from this. All right, so we want to make sure that you have a classic project objective statement. We want to make sure you have a project objective statement. So what you're looking at here are examples of two project objective statements, and we're going to give you one that's not a local food systems project objective statement, but it's one that's just well known and illustrates the idea of what you're shooting for. Put a man on the moon and return him safely by December 31st, 1969 at a cost of $9 billion. That was NASA's project objectives statement for the lunar mission. And a side note here is that the original cost estimate for that was $530 million, so that project got a little more expensive. But you see the point there is that it's a very simple, clear objective of what you're trying to do. So we really want you to shoot for that with whatever project, whatever initiative that you're working on in your community. So for example, if we go with the farmers market example, it may be create a fully operational farmers market within 8 months at a cost of X amount of dollars. You and your team really want to have a very simple, clear explanation that's simple, it's specific, and that's easy to share with others. So get that clear objective statement. There are going to be some challenges that your teams will face as you move forward. We've hit on some of these, like getting a very clear and specific goals. That's often a challenge for teams. Making sure that you have a clear, compelling purpose for the work that you're going to be doing. There are others that you can also think about that may get in the way of the work that your team wants to do. We talked about some of those earlier. It could be things like managing your time in meetings. It can be around developing shared accountability for everybody working on your project, gaining and keeping stakeholder support. So there are some various challenges for you and your team as you move forward, and go ahead and take the time to think about those challenges, both the challenges you might face and then how you might work on those and address those as you move forward. Collaborative projects and project management in general, and the projects that you are doing are collaborative projects. It's about people skills as much as it is about the hard skills of putting it all together. Especially when you're working with a range of stakeholders in your community. So this slide here relates to the importance of people skills, and really the importance of what we'd call soft skills or people skills, and hard skills are just some of the more nuts and bolts of putting your budgets together and your schedules together and those kinds of things that you need to have in place as you put together and manage your projects. The main point here is that when you work collaboratively in your community, how you work with people and building trust with people is really going to be the difference between success and more success. So you want to make sure that you think about the soft skills, really the people skills, and working together with others, and how you interact with them in meetings and in your communications with them. Once you've clarified your objective, you're going to need to develop a roadmap for your project. And I think that most of you are familiar with the term of a logic model. It's a tool that is used to help teams organize their projects and organize their initiatives. What is a logic model? It's a document. I'll show you an example of it. It's often just a one-page, high-level strategic plan. It could be text. It could be a visual diagram. And it can have different levels of detail about the project. So I'm going to show you an example of those. So why do you use those? So the point is you want to make sure that you understand how you're going to get from here to there. You're going to map out your process and make sure that not only you're clear, your leadership team is clear, as well as other stakeholders that you're going to be working with in your projects are clear about where you're trying to go and how you're going to get there. And it's a way to help communicate. It can be used for PR purposes. And you want to make sure that you're using language in this that everybody understands, terms that everyone is comfortable with and everyone understands. So what does it look like, a logic model? Here's an example of one that can be used. There's a section for inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So what this really means is that under inputs, what are the resources that you're investing in a particular project? What are the time, people, money? What are those inputs that you're putting in to the project? Outputs. The outputs can be thought about as activities. What is it that you're going to be doing? So when you think about the example of a farmer's market, what are going to be the major steps, the major stages that you're going to be undergoing, the major stages that you'll be tackling as you go from where you are to implementing and launching your farmer's market, for example. In addition to the activities, who are the people that you're involving in this, and who is going to be doing the work on being responsible for the work for each of these major steps and activities that are involved in your project. And then under the outcomes column, there's short-term outcomes, short-term results, medium-term, long-term, and then you want to have outcome measures. How are you going to evaluate what you're doing? So again, the point here is that you have a high-level roadmap that tells you what your resources and inputs are, the major steps of your project, what those are and who's going to be the lead person, and then what the outcomes are. You'll have already defined your outcomes and objectives earlier as you've gone through your is not exercise, and you're going to use this as a place to capture those outcomes, and then your outcome measures, how you're going to be evaluating this. So we'll show you an example of what a logic model looks like. And so this is a logic model that CEFS put together for the local, building a sustainable local food system in North Carolina. And Joanna is going to be sending the file to you as we speak right now, realizing that this on the screen is a bit hard to read, so you'll be able to have it on your computer and you can look at it more closely. This is a high-level visual flow chart of the statewide initiative. At the top, you've got a vision statement. The next step down explains why this is important, what are some of the assets that North Carolina has in place, some of the inputs that are being used for this initiative, some of the major strategies, some of the major results, the outputs. Then at the bottom you've got outcomes. So I'm not going to walk through this in detail. Even though it's a simple one-page chart, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of detail that supports each of these steps There's many layers and many details that go into it. But the average person who may not be familiar with your project, or someone that you're just sharing with this information the first time, can take a look at this and they can get the idea. They can see where you're going and how you're going to get there. So we encourage you to use some kind of roadmap, some kind of logic model to get your plan in place at a high level so that everybody sees where you're going. So we're going to shift to this idea here is get early wins if you can. So think about selecting an idea or a project that you and your leadership team can accomplish quickly. That helps build momentum for the work that you're going to do. And an early win might also be getting key community support, or getting a grant, or securing funding early. So think about what are some early wins that you can tackle. If you're having a broad, wide scope, you're tackling many different initiatives, is there some low-hanging fruit that you can accomplish quickly? When you accomplish something quickly, when you get an early win, it builds momentum, it energizes your team. So think about those. Think about, how can I get an early win? How can we get an early win? So we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to focus on energizing the community and how you can work with stakeholders and engage the community in your project planning. We want to make sure, as you get ready to go out and engage stakeholders, engage the public if that's part of your process, that you make sure that you give them a sense of how they're going to be involved in the process. If you're going to be having stakeholder meetings, if you're going to be having public forums, if you have a broader initiative that you're working on, make sure that the public knows how they're going to be engaged. Make sure that they have an opportunity to provide meaningful input, that they have an opportunity potentially to participate in implementation. So we really want you to think about how you engage the community. Be very deliberate and and think about how you can utilize your stakeholders to help make your project more effective. So this is another diagram that I often find helpful as I'm thinking about community and stakeholder-based projects. And Joanna is going to be sending this file to you as well because it's difficult to read. This map focuses on external or public participation, but it really applies to other types of stakeholder-based projects, including those who might be internal stakeholders. People often think that there's one way to involve the public in a project, but really there are many different types of involvement and levels of involvement. And so again, we want you to be thoughtful and deliberate about how you engage the public and stakeholders and what role they'll have in your project. As you look at this diagram here, on the left-hand column, there's a lower level of public involvement. And in these kinds of projects, you're simply going out and you're informing people about what you're doing. You're saying that we're going to keep you informed, you're going to provide you with information, and the major focus is to inform them. As you move up the ladder here, consulting with your stakeholders or with the public, is that you're trying to get their feedback on potential options or ideas. You're going to keep them informed, you're going to listen and acknowledge their concerns, and you're going to let them know how that feedback influenced the decision. If you're having greater public or stakeholder involvement, you're involving them. You're working with them throughout the process, throughout the project, to make sure that any concerns or aspirations are reflected in the final product that you're producing. You're moving up the ladder here, you're collaborating, you're working directly with the stakeholders in this project. And then ultimately you get to empower, which is when you're literally turning the final decisions into the hands of your stakeholders. So the point of this map is not to say that having more involvement, more collaboration is necessarily better than having less. The point here is to say that you really want to think about what makes sense for your stakeholders. Sometimes you may just need to simply inform certain stakeholders. Other stakeholders you may need to collaborate. But think about who your stakeholders are, who you need to have greater involvement with or less involvement with, and incorporate that into your plan. That's going to help you be successful. So when you get into the process of facilitating community involvement, facilitating community change, there's really three things to think about. Before you get involved with it, three steps. Make sure that the community, the participants, the stakeholders are prepared, that you've got a good space to engage them. This is really when you get into a meeting space, and that you yourself are very, very clear about the information that you need to have prepared. You want to make sure that your participants have details, and these are nuts and bolts things, details of the location, the time, the agenda of the upcoming meeting. They have this information well in advance so that they can think of questions. You want to let them know who's expected to speak at a meeting and whom they should contact if they have any questions before an event. When it comes to preparing the space, you want to make sure that the space is conducive for whatever the meeting's purpose is. If you're going to have small group exercises, avoid a space that has fixed seating or inability to cluster participants comfortably. You want to make sure the space is well lit, has enough chairs and tables to accommodate the participants. Any information that you're going to present should be visible from all of the seats. Some details like water fountains and spaces for participants to take breaks. Make sure you provide snacks, local foods if possible. So these are nuts and bolts things that you want to think through before you engage your stakeholders. And it gets back to what we talked about earlier with the team performance model and making sure people know why you're having this meeting and what to expect and how the meeting's going to be run. So how do you manage the experience of the stakeholder meeting? These are some steps here. So you want to make sure that the context is clear. You've clearly explained what the project is. You want it to be a safe and comfortable environment. You want to make sure there's mutual trust and respect. Did participants have the information that they need to be informed through handouts or other presentations so that they can give informed responses? Do you have a way to make sure that all the participants were able to participate? You want to encourage full participation through, you can do this through individual or small group exercises when you have a larger stakeholder group. Were the conversations focused? You have clear instructions and conversation topics. So these are the kinds of things that you want to think about, this checklist here about how you have an effective community engagement. And this again is when you have a larger group of people that you're engaging. This is an example of what a room actually might look like. Seems like a basic concept to have a meeting room, but there are different ways that you can do it. What we're showing you here is a room that's set up with round tables, a place for people to work in small groups. You want to make sure that the room is large enough, that there is comfortable chairs, if possible, enough lighting. You want to make sure that your room has audio-visual equipment. All these little details are really important to make sure that that experience, that stakeholder experience, shows that you're organized, shows that you want their input, and that their input matters, and that you have a good way to gather that input. So we're going to move on to some of the exercises that you can utilize when you're working with your stakeholders on a particular project again, or if it's a broader-based initiative, a community visioning initiative. So we're going to share a few exercises here with you. So this is a asset map. Again, you don't have to have a map that looks like this to be able to do an asset-based map. But the point here is start with what are the things that you have in place. So you could use this if you're focusing on your farmers market project. When it comes to producers, what are some of the assets that you have in place? Are there particular governmental regulations or governmental agencies that can help support you in your work? Are there distributors that are in place that can help support you? You can put different columns here that are relevant to the work that you're doing. the main point is use an asset-based approach. You can develop an asset map to work with what you have in your community, whether it's a specific project or a broad-based initiative that you're engaging with. So start with your assets. Another exercise that you can use is gathering input from your stakeholders around their aspirations for the future. And so this is an example of an exercise called a magazine cover story vision. So the way that this exercise works is, let's imagine, and you can use this for a farmer's market example or another particular example, but let's imagine that your community's farmer's market it's 5 years into the future. Your farmer's market has been wildly successful. It's been so successful that there's a national magazine that's writing about your farmer's market, and it's going to be a cover story. So I want you to take some time to think about this magazine, or it might be an internet publication. What magazine is reporting on your community's farmer's market? What's the title of this story? What are some of the images that you have in place? What are some of the big headlines for your farmer's market? What are people saying about your farmer's market? What are some of the facts and statistics and sidebars that help that help illustrate your story? This is a group exercise. So literally what you can do is you can instruct a small group of people or a larger group of people to imagine that your farmer's market is wildly successful. You're going to create this magazine story. When you tell the story of what you've accomplished, it makes it easier for folks to visualize and be explicit about what they're trying to accomplish. So the magazine cover story is a great visioning exercise to help you understand people's objectives and really get a sense of the desired results that people are looking for. So you can use this in some different ways. One more exercise that you can use, if you've got a particular idea that you want to get some reactions to, you can use something. This is similar to a SWOT analysis, called a SPOT, your idea SPOT. And so we have an idea, and we want to find out what works about this idea. What are the strengths? What are some potential problems with this idea? What are some opportunities to make it better, to improve on it? Are there some potential threats that may derail this project idea? So you could use this with the farmer's market as a way to get input from your stakeholders about what they like, maybe some concerns they have, how to improve it, and what might derail it. So just a simple exercise, and again, you don't have to have a fancy chart like this. You can just have 4 pieces of flip chart paper and start to list those ideas. But the main point is that you're getting input from your stakeholders that'll help you evaluate your ideas. So these are a couple different exercises, and Joanna is going to be able to send you this PowerPoint, which you'll have these, and to help you think about how you might use them in your work. Okay. One more exercise here, categorizing your project ideas. Let's say, for example, that you have 10 or 12 project ideas, and you want to think about how you might, which ones that you might want to move forward on, and which ones might be more difficult to move forward on. This is another chart to help you do that. So there's really 4 different areas that you could place an idea. If it's an idea that's perhaps easy to do and might have low to medium impact, that's your low-hanging fruit idea. An idea that's a stone soup idea is one that may be difficult to accomplish and maybe have limited impact. So that would be in the stone soup category and probably not one that you'd want to pursue. A golden nugget idea is one that might be fairly easy to do and might be a high-impact project. And so those are your golden nugget ideas. And prickly pear ideas are ideas that could have a high impact but may be difficult to do. So the point here is that you can take a list of ideas and have your leadership team or have the community sort those ideas and put them into some of these different categories. It's a way to help you evaluate ideas and ultimately help you understand which ideas might be more palatable to some of your stakeholders, and ultimately help you decide which ones you might want to pursue or not pursue. This is another exercise and another tool that you can use. After you've engaged your stakeholders, after you've engaged the community in your project, you and your leadership team should get together immediately and analyze the data that you have. You want to look at the input that you received. You want to summarize, synthesize the implications on your project, and decide how you want to share your findings. And again, it's important to make sure that you share all your findings. And of course, being respectful to all community input, even if you disagree with it. So the main point here in this slide is when you go out and you solicit stakeholder input, get back together with your team and analyze it together. So you avoid situations where one person from your team thought a stakeholder had one idea, someone else heard something else in the meeting, and you've perhaps come away with different perception of people's ideas. You want to get back together with your team, make sure that you're all on the same page about what you heard and what you took away from your stakeholder conversations. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, but we want to make the point that as you go forward with your projects, that you're monitoring, you're controlling, you're evaluating. These are critical components of community initiatives that really don't get the attention they deserve often. But once you get started, make sure that you have a way to monitor, are you meeting the time schedule? Are you meeting your budget that you've set forth? Are you able to evaluate how you're doing based on what you're hoping to accomplish? Make sure that somebody on your team is keeping track of all those things so that you know if you're on track or off track, and you can share that with the other folks from your team. Also want to make sure that you've developed a way to evaluate your project. Think about who is your target audience. What are some potential evaluation questions? How can you measure these? And how can you measure these? And it's best to start with a greater number of potential evaluation questions, but maybe ultimately narrow it down to 2 or 3 things that you're going to be looking at, you're going to be measuring to help you evaluate whether your project has been successful or not. So, a quick review as we wrap up, and then we'll have some time for questions. First thing we want you to do, first plan it, then do it. So take the time to plan your project out carefully before you do it. Go slow to go fast. Second point, high performance teams succeed. The teams that go through those stages, that get momentum early on, are successful. Meetings really matter. Anytime that you and your leadership team, anytime that you engage stakeholders in your work, these meetings really matter. Make sure that you set them up. You do the work ahead of time to let people know what to expect, and you make these meetings a forum to really share and build on ideas. And then work with your assets, those asset maps. Build on what you have on your community. When you build on what you have and you think about the possibilities, it's a great way to help you think creatively about how to get things done. And so just a couple of final thoughts for you. Really ingredients for success as you go out into your community and you continue to do the work that you're doing, and you train others to do this work. When you're passionate, obviously, when you're passionate, that's a key ingredient. People that are passionate want to do this work, and I know that the folks on this webinar are all passionate about local food systems. Be a problem solver. Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves. There may not be an obvious correct answer, but be a problem solver as you get into this. Think about how you can tackle something in a way that maybe someone else hasn't thought of. So roll up your sleeves, be a problem solver, be a skilled facilitator. As you're with your leadership team, as you're working with other stakeholders, how can you facilitate the process? And then be an effective communicator. The folks that are good at facilitating and communicating and being really clear about what they're trying to accomplish with, especially with these stakeholder-based processes, can really help themselves. So those are some ingredients for success. And with that, I'm going to shift the webinar back to you.
Thanks so much
would invite and welcome any questions
great interactive presentation.
that folks on the webinar have.
So we have some time here for questions and answers. If you all had some questions you saved up for the end, go ahead and type those into the chat bar, and I'll help moderate those through Warren. Ellen's asking if there's a timeline for our projects, so that would be directed to me. For the SARE-PDP projects, the Phase 2, we are looking at getting an extension on this, so we're looking towards November as the end of the Phase 1 projects, since your projects were announced to us in November of 2010. Does that help you? Any other questions out there? I see that a few folks are typing, so we're just waiting to see their. Great, thanks Tisha. Warren did provide a lot of great resources, and actually I'm going to send the PowerPoint presentation to you all. And he has some graphics in there that would be great to include just as individual documents. And I'll end up posting those to the SARE-PDP resources page in the next week or so. And Shanika, can an email be sent with all the links shared on this webinar? Certainly. You can have Chelsea copy and paste that right now, and we can send that to you all. And we'll send it to the project leaders to send out to other folks. I see a couple other folks typing. I'm going to go ahead and send out the file. It may take a little bit of time to load since it's a PowerPoint. Chenille, we are slowly moving towards our farmers market, and this was so helpful. The communities are on board. Some of your ideas we will use. Excellent. Glad to hear that. And I see Taylor's typing in. Taylor says he suggested a leadership group for the project. Leaders may have different reporting needs. How do you collect and share data that helps to make all stakeholders feel successful? Warren, do you want to respond to that?
So Taylor, if I understand your question here, how do you collect and share data that helps to make all stakeholders feel successful? So when you're working with different stakeholders, and really this may be a question that we can take offline. Part of what you're wanting to understand is what are their expectations. So perhaps when you're working with them, understanding what their expectations are in terms of what they'll receive about this project or what you're going to be able to share with them, get that up front. Explain that to them up front. So it may be that you want to share, here's our plan, here's how we're going to move forward with this, and as we move forward, this is the information that we'll be sharing as we move forward. If you need more or you need something different, please let us know. But what I would say is that just have those conversations up front, because you're right, people have different reporting needs. And make sure that you have those conversations up front, either when you're working with your leadership team or when you're working with the stakeholders, so that you know what their expectations are.
Great.
And,
thanks, Warren.
And I'd be happy to answer.
Chenille says our leadership group is the Board of County Commissioners, Economic Development Commission, farmers, and agribusiness leaders. Who else should be on the Farmers Market Committee?
Well, that's a good list. You know, you may want to consider, and I would encourage other folks on this webinar to chime in. But there may be some private sector. It might be the chamber, it might be the Visitors Bureau. So you might want to think about some of the private sector folks that could be involved. But typically, if you work with you've got some of the key leaders here on it. But what I would do is you can check with them to see if there are other people that they might want to include in this leadership group. Are there foundations? Are there nonprofits? Are there health agencies? So think about some different people that might be able to help you achieve some of the objectives that you've laid out for your project. Or just connect with your leadership group and ask them who might be able to
fully loaded. You should be able to download it at this time. And I don't see any other chat going on that anybody else is typing in. So it looks like there are no other questions out there for now. And thank you all for sitting in on the webinar today. Chelsea also posted into the chat box an evaluation link, a survey for this webinar. It would be great if you all could go to that link and just provide us some feedback on the webinar today. And at this time, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll call this the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for participating with us.